So we are moving to the fourth speaker and last this panel, to Gustavo Guzman. Gustavo Guzman is a postdoctoral fellow at the Vidal-Sassoon International Center for Study of Anti-Semitism in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, with a project on General Pinochet, Israel, and the Jews. Dr. Guzman earned his PhD at Tel Aviv University with a dissertation on Jewish immigration and right-wing attitudes toward Jews in Chile from the 1930s through the 1980s. In 2021-22, Dr. Guzman was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Potsdam Institute for Jewish Studies, where he studies the German Jewish migration to Chile, Peru, and Bolivia after World War II. Dr. Guzman will present on nationality, property, and remigration, the impact of German reparations on the Jews of Chile, 1952-1977. Please.
Good evening, thank you. Well, yes, indeed, I did my PhD here in Tel Aviv University with Professor Anan Ryan. I originally planned to write a dissertation about anti-Semitism in Chile, which is a very original idea in Chile, but in Israel it's not original at all. So I had to change my original plan, and I wrote this book, which is called Attitudes of the Chilean Right Toward Jews, in which I explore not only hostility and anti-Semitism, but also a wide array of attitudes toward Jews. And why I'm mentioning this, because a problem of this of Tel Aviv University, which is my university, is that from the moment that you submit your dissertation until you receive like the reports, it was like 4 or 5 months. So what could I do in those 4 or 5 months in the pandemics in Chile? Well, what I did was I conducted around between 15 and 20 interviews through Zoom. And at that time I was talking with, Professor Ryan suggested me to talk with Professor Rouveni. Professor Rouveni suggested me to talk with Professor Siemens, and I talked with Professor Siemens, and he suggested me to deal with certain topics. Thank you very much to both of you, of course. So that's how I got to this topic. And in these interviews that I conducted, the issue of the German reparations was present, not all the time, but very often. And there's absolutely nothing written about the topic in the Jewish studies in Latin America. So, and regarding that, it's late, that we are exhausted, I wrote a short story to tell you, and I hope not to be too long and not to be too boring. I did a little change to the title of my presentation. I renamed it On Class, Nationality, and Remigration. Why? Because I'm just exploring 3 areas, 3 fields in which the impact of German reparations, I think, is interesting and can illuminate other fields, so to speak. On class, the leaders of Chilean Jewry had multiple concerns by the early 50s. After years of silence, right-wing anti-Semites had re-emerged to establish Estanquero, a magazine that catered to a new generation of right-wingers through an anti-communist discourse that included unabashed anti-Jewish references. Arab Chileans, who had successfully lobbied against the partition plan for Palestine vis-à-vis the Chilean government in 1947, had gained political influence, becoming key allies of Carlos Ibáñez del Campo, the former right-wing dictator who planned to run for president in 1952. The authoritarian tendencies of General Ibáñez were, not surprisingly, another source of concern for Jews. Also, hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish immigrants live in or close to poverty, which put strong pressure on communal institutions and donors. By the mid-50s, however, those concerns had largely dissipated. Right-wing anti-Semites remained secondary actors of national politics. Arab Chileans were unable to advance their anti-Israel agenda, and President Ibáñez proved friendly to Jews, encouraging, for instance, the naturalization of hundreds of stateless Israelites, how they said in those years. The poverty of Jewish immigrants, nonetheless, remained a central concern for Chilean jury. This made German reparations critically important at the time. The Claims Conference funded Chilean institutions from 1954. That year, it allocated funding to two organizations, the Junta Judía de Ayuda y Rehabilitación Jewish Board for Relief and Rehabilitation, which assisted Jewish refugees, and Vaad Ahinuch, the entity that managed the country's Jewish schools. The contributions of the Claims Conference made a difference. Whereas the former could expand its activities regardless of Chile's recurrent economic crisis, the latter purchased a new campus for the Instituto Chaim Weizmann, the main Jewish school in Chile. The new campus was located in an upper middle class in Ñuñoa district. Notwithstanding the importance of those contributions, that only two Jewish Chilean institutions received funding from the Claims Conference was a failure, which led its treasurer, Moses A. Leavitt, to visit Chile in October 1954 to encourage funding applications. His efforts succeeded. In 1958, the Claims Conference funded other 7 Jewish Chilean institutions, including a nursing home and the organizations of German-speaking Jews, Sociedad Israelita B'nai Yisroel, and that of Hungarian-speaking Jews, the Club Maye. Even the Zionist Federation of Chile, which showed no enthusiasm at all for German reparations, was funded by the Claims Conference. The United Restitution Organization was in Chile as well. Sources at the Central Archives for the History of the Jewish People reveal that the URO had a branch in downtown Santiago at least since 1961. In July of that year, the leaders of Club Maye, the Club of the Hungarian-speaking Jews, addressed the URO Santiago office, certifying that the modest Hungarian widow had lost her husband and son at the Nazis' hands and requested compensation for her. But the URO presence in Chile seems to predate the early 60s. Indeed, Boletín Informativo Mitteilungsblatt, a monthly publication belonging to Sociedad Israelita B'nai Yisroel, informed about the URO activities in Chile and encouraged its readership to apply for reparations from 1956 onwards. Thus, there was a framework for German reparations in Chile in the early 60s. The Claims Conference and URO were key parts of that framework. So, too, were the Jewish institutions of Chile, starting with the umbrella organization of Chilean Jewry, the Comité Representativo de la Colectividad Israelita de Chile, which not only represented Chilean Jews vis-a-vis the Chilean government, but also vis-a-vis the Claims Conference, the American Jewish Committee, the World Jewish Congress, etc. More reduced entities such as Sociedad Israelita B'nai Yisroel were part of that reparations framework too, facilitating the access of some of their members to German indemnification. Another critical link in that chain was the German embassies, which located individuals in Chile susceptible to receiving pensions or property restitution. German reparation had a significant impact on the social standing of Chilean Jews, at least on that of Jews of German origins. At a group level, the Claims Conference co-funded organizations as important as Jewish schools and nursing homes, which is not trivial, as attending a private school and retiring at a nursing home were things that the immense majority of Chileans could not afford at that time. At an individual level, German reparations had a greater impact, improving the lives of former refugees in a very direct way. Sources at the Federal Archives of Berlin show that Jewish applicants living in Chile were restituted with goods that made their middle class lives stronger, such as precious metals, bonds, bank accounts and securities, real estate, and so on. Needless to say, that restituted at best a slight part of all the properties that Nazi Germany had stolen from their families. However, that restitution, as limited as it might seem today, made a material difference for many. The same can be said about pensions. Although the amounts were small, German pensions were crucial for hundreds of Jewish families in Chile. This proved especially true during the 70s, when economic crisis turned foreign currencies heaven sent. Accounts available at the website of Memoria Viva, a foundation that compiles testimonies from Holocaust survivors who migrated to Chile, confirm this. Anne-Marie Warenberg, who fled Nazi Germany in 1939, recounts that German pensions improved the lives of her parents. Up to the second half of the 50s, they had worked, quote, unquote, on anything without much success. Once they started receiving pensions from West Germany, they were able to afford an apartment in Lira Street, downtown Santiago, that is, in a middle class neighborhood. Other Memoria Viva interviewees, Fred Spiegel, Heinrich Engel, Margot Levy, give similar accounts about the importance of German pensions for the lives of their parents. Yet, Memoria Viva testimonies not only illuminate the impact of German reparations on Chilean Jews' socio-economic standing, they also shed light on the impact of reparations on how Jewish German exiles approach their nationality. And then I go to the second field of impact, which is on nationality. Brigitte Salomon arrived in Chile in 1946. She came from Britain, where she had spent the last 7 years of her life as a refugee. Brigitte's father was a prosperous trader up to the late 30s, when Nazi persecution forced him to flee. Following Kristallnacht, the Nazis sent him to Buchenwald concentration camp and seized his apartment, after which he managed to send Brigitte to Scotland and later get Chilean visas for his wife and himself. Salomon's new life in Chile after the war was hard. In addition to problems with Spanish language and innumerable cultural gaps, this family had serious economic problems as well, which made German compensations precious. After years of struggle, Margaret Salomon, the mother of Brigitte, was compensated for the theft of gold, silver, and jewels that her family had suffered in the 30s. The family used that funding in their small laboratory in Santiago, which produced perfumes and soaps for the provinces of Chile. The laboratory earned the Salomons a solid middle upper class life. Nevertheless, Brigitte's parents never returned to Germany, not even as tourists. Neither did Brigitte. When she was invited to visit Germany, she did not hesitate to decline the invitation. She simply could not forget what the Germans had done to her family. Other Memoria Viva accounts are similar. Elfriede Simon, who came to Chile in 1939 in the wake of the November pogrom, recounts that her mother adamantly refused to be again in Germany. Some of the Jewish immigrants that I interviewed for my doctoral dissertation, as well as their parents, felt just like Mrs. Simon. Dina Krauskopf, who immigrated with her parents to Chile in 1939, told me her mother was as German as Jewish. She spoke German at home, admired German literature, and cooked kuchens every weekend. However, she declined to go to Germany after the war. Ricardo Dueñas, a Jewish Chilean physician of Sephardi origins, told me that his father-in-law, Mr. Rolf Orzegov, emphatically refused to visit Germany too. Other interviewees did visit their former country, but they emphasized that they would not live there, quote unquote, because of what happened there. Such were the cases of Fred Spiegel and Margot Levy. Thomas Hirsch, one of the few Jewish Chilean congressmen today, remembers that her mother not only visited Germany after the war, but also recovered German nationality for her children and herself during one of those trips, a move that her husband did not agree with. It is interesting that regardless of their troubled relationship with Germany and with Germanness, most of these individuals consider themselves Germans. In this sense, they differ from other Jewish immigrants who, like Ewald Wettstein, another Memoria Viva interviewee, say, quote unquote, I am Chilean. Chile is my country because Chile saved my life. What is even more interesting is the impact of Holocaust reparations and property restitution on how Jewish Germans viewed German nationality in Chile. Bodo Borgheim, who migrated to Chilean Patagonia in the 30s, was one of those who approached West Germany's embassy in Santiago in the wake of Wiedergutmachung. In order to apply for a pension and property restitution, Mr. Borgheim had to, quote unquote, re register himself and his son Walter as German citizens, something he did in the mid 60s. So too did the parents of Anne-Marie Warenberg, who I mentioned earlier. Despite the strong sentiments involved, Nazi Germany had dispossessed and exiled them. The Warenbergs recovered their German nationality as a means to get their pensions. Robert Funk, a renowned political scientist of German origins, recalls how his grandmother too took German nationality back before receiving reparation, and so on. There are many, many stories like this. When it comes to the interaction of German reparations and nationality, that of Hans Kiechenthal is a case in point. Like thousands of other Jewish German refugees, the Kiechenthals arrived in Chile in 1939, a few months before the Aguirre Cerda administration barred Jewish immigration. Like other Jewish German newcomers, too, they came in possession of a few Reichmarks and little luggage. But unlike others, Hans' father used one of those suitcases to bring a huge set of documents proving his ownership of companies, real estate, and bank accounts. They were very rich until the Nazis came to power, and Kiechenthal hoped that they might be restituted one day if he had the proper documents, which proved true. Sources at the Jewish Archive of Chile show that shortly after the end of World War II, Kiechenthal started his years-long quest for property restitution and compensation. The task was especially difficult as their property were in East Germany, and the communist authorities showed no enthusiasm for restituting them, especially in the beginning. However, Kiechenthal's efforts, which included the assistance of German and American attorneys, were successful, and East Germany restituted real estate to his family. Before that, the communists had given Kiechenthal an important sum of money as an indemnification for other properties, which allowed the family to get their first house in Chile. To have German nationality was fundamental in order to be compensated, though. Hans Kiechenthal was a child when his father started his long quest for restitution, and he recalls that quest clearly. According to Hans, his father always distinguished German nationality or Germanness from the acts that the German government and the German people committed against the Jews. He did feel a German. Nevertheless, such a national identification did not condone at all the dispossession and exile of their family, let alone the attempt to exterminate the Jews. I am a German, said Hans Kiechenthal to Memoria Viva. Although he lives in Chile since the 30s, he has never naturalized. In this sense, his case differs from other stories seen above. The most remarkable case of how German reparations interact with German nationality in Chile, however, is that of Gunther Sellmann. And this is the last case I will mention. Born in 1931 in Aachen, Germany, Sellmann and his family moved to Chile in the wake of Kristallnacht. His father, who had proudly fought for Germany in World War I and earned the Iron Cross, was sent to Buchenwald following the November pogrom. They settled in Concepcion, in the south of Chile, where thousands of Germans lived since the 19th century. Gunther attended public schools where poverty was rampant. His academic performance was outstanding, which allowed him to enroll in the University of Concepcion's School of Medicine. It is worth noting that Gunther, when he entered the university and was this excellent student, it is worth noting that Gunther did not consider himself a German at that point. Although his parents, sister, and himself spoke German at home, he never felt he was a German. On the contrary, the humiliation that the Nazis had inflicted on his father impeded him from doing so. In his own words, Sellmann viewed himself as a Chilean and as a Jew, but not as a German. Indeed, he never considered approaching a German embassy to recover his nationality, and it was difficult for him to understand why his father did so and applied for a pension from West Germany's government. It was only the political context of the 70s that changed his view. After General Pinochet overthrew President Salvador Allende on September 11, 1973, Navy agents arrested Sellmann and sent him to Isla Quiriquina detention camp, where he was interned for 8 months. Efforts from the FRG embassy and Lutheran Bishop Helmut Franz, however, made it possible that the military authorities released him in mid-1974. As soon as he was released, he moved to Dusseldorf along with his family. Sellmann was a Jewish German remigrant, and this now started the third part and the last on remigration, the impact of German reparations on remigration. Sellmann planned to be a short time in West Germany and moved to a Latin America country such as Cuba and work for the return of Chilean democracy from there. However, federal authorities quickly restituted his German nationality and got him a position at the Dusseldorf hospital, which made Sellmann change his original plans. I saw his interview in Memoria Viva website, and I considered so interesting that I managed to have his phone number, and I called him, and we organized a 2 hours long conversation in Zoom. So now I'm going to focus only on him. Of course, I disliked the idea of returning to Germany, he told me. He yelled at me when I asked this stupid question. But they welcomed me. They treated me excellent, he said to me. Also, there was a strong, quote unquote, anti nationalistic and anti authoritarian atmosphere there, he said, which made him reconsider the issue of his nationality. Since Germany had saved his life, restituted his nationality, and employed him, Sellmann had good reasons to view himself as a German, and he did so after a few years. Also, his wife, Miss Hanne Grumpeter, a Jewish nurse born in Czechoslovakia, had a good job there, and their 3 children attended a good public school as well. At that point, Gunther considered himself finally a German. It is interesting noting that although the deadlines of the Wiedergutmachung regulation had already expired when Selman moved to Dusseldorf in the mid 70s, this is for me very interesting. Selman himself, he views his story as a case of German reparation. Put differently, Selman thinks the gestures of West Germany's authorities towards him and his family did actually repair, at least partially, the damage that Nazi Germany had inflicted on his family. He was explicit about this issue. Something similar happened with Anne-Marie Warenberg after socialist candidate Salvador Allende triumphed at the polls in September 1970. Warenberg and her husband sold off their factory and moved to West Germany, where they lived for 13 years. Just like Selman, she was a Jewish German immigrant, and like Selman too, she viewed the return to Germany as an act of reparation. Before Anne-Marie moved there, her parents had successfully applied for pensions and property restitution. Um, okay, I'm just finishing. I just want to finish with an observation that the historiography of German reparations has paid little, if any, attention to Latin America, considering that more than 100,000 Jews went as refugees to Latin America in the 30s and 40s. That disregard is remarkable. At the same time, Jewish Latin American studies, a field that has grown monumentally in the last 2 decades, and I finish with this, has completely ignored the matter of Wiedergutmachung, which is no less remarkable. My research project, which deals with the Jewish refugees to Chile, Peru, and Bolivia that returned to Germany after 1945, aims to filling that gap through a methodological bit that combines archival work and oral history, but I will not expand because it's redundant. Thank you so much.
Speakers, and thank you for the audience that is here with us so late.